Welcome to the Parkinson's Project podcast. The Parkinson's Project seeks to erase the stigma associated with Parkinson's disease while empowering and inspiring those dealing with the affliction to live life to the fullest. The Parkinson's Project aspires to build an engaged, supportive community while examining the journey of living with Parkinson's disease through a positive, empowering perspective. Here is your host of the Parkinson's Project podcast, Tim McNiff.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Parkinson's Project podcast. I am Tim McNiff. The Parkinson's Project seeks to eliminate the stigma associated with the disease and instead to empower and inspire those dealing with Parkinson's disease to live their life to the fullest. The intent of the Parkinson's Project podcast is to share the stories of the people who are living with PD and to share best practices from the medical people who are on the front line working to find a cure. And we're also going to hear from the advocates, those people who are helping Parkinsonians deal and adapt through diet, exercise, and of course, with love, understanding, and unconditional support. Now, we're going to try to keep our episodes to about 20 to 30 minutes. However, if we find we're in the middle of a compelling conversation, we reserve the right to extend that discussion to a second episode with the intent being to deliver tangible, beneficial content to all who engage with us. And we encourage that engagement with an ultimate goal of putting ourselves out of business when there is no longer a need to talk about Parkinson's disease. And it is with that I have the pleasure of welcoming Rose Wichmann to the Parkinson's Project. Rose, I know you're busy today. I want to thank you for finding some time in your schedule to talk with us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you here. And if you would give me the opportunity, I'd like to tell everybody, if you don't know Rose already, and you should, who she is and what she does. Rose is the director of the Struthers Parkinson Center, part of Park Nicollet Health Services Health Partners. They have two locations, one in Golden Valley, the other in St. Paul, Minnesota. In addition to her 35 plus years of experience as a physical therapist, you must have started at the age of 10. Rose is responsible for center operations. She's also involved in educational programs designed to improve Parkinson's awareness for patients, family care partners, senior residential communities, home care agencies, and rural outreach areas. And if that's not enough, and don't you think it really ought to be, Rose is a frequent speaker, co-developer of the Struthers Parkinson's Care Network, a past president of Parkinson Association of Minnesota, and a past recipient of the Silverstein Community Service Award for her work to improve programs and services for the Parkinson's community here in the Upper Midwest. Rose is also a proud graduate of the University of Minnesota School of Physical Therapy. She's been a contributing author to several textbooks on Parkinson's disease, and she is the co-author of several publications distributed by the Parkinson's Foundation. There's more. I edited that down. So that's what we've got for you right now, Rose. The title of this installment, after having conversation with Rose, is You Need to Get Yourself a Team. Now, before you explain to us why someone diagnosed with Parkinson's disease does need to get a team, I'd like to backtrack if I could and talk about Park Nicollet Struthers Parkinson Center and the work that's being done there. Can you give us a brief overview of sort of what the mission is?
Absolutely. Struthers Parkinson Center, located here in Golden Valley, it's part of Park Nicollet and also Health Partners at the St. Paul location, strives very hard, for lack of a better term, to kind of be a one-stop shop for the treatment and support of individuals living with Parkinson's. So we have a full team of medical professionals, physicians, nurses, rehab therapists, social workers. And in addition to that, Struthers Parkinson Center is involved in research, provides a variety of education and support programs for people living with Parkinson's and their family care partners. And we serve the Upper Midwest, the 5-state Upper Midwest area.
So the Struthers Parkinson Center has been designated as a Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence. Now, that sounds very impressive. What does it mean?
Well, we're very proud of that designation. last count, there are approximately 47 centers in the world that have the designation from the Parkinson's Foundation, which is an international organization with offices in New York City and Miami.
Okay.
There's about 47 centers that are designated centers of excellence. And what that means is you need to meet specific criteria to receive that designation. You need first to be able to offer team-based care with medical professionals who specialize in Parkinson's disease. You need to do what the Parkinson's Foundation calls credible research in the field. You need to provide a variety of outreach and support programs for the Parkinson's community. And you also need to be able to offer training to other medical professionals so they can better care for people living with Parkinson's disease. We're extremely proud because Struthers Parkinson Center was actually the model that the Parkinson's Foundation used way back in the early 2000s as they were developing their criteria for centers of excellence.
Very impressive. And I want to, full disclosure, tell people that we had a pre-conversation, a couple phone calls actually. And if you're ever going to be on this show, know that that's part of the deal. I always say, I don't know anything about what we're talking about. I've only been in this field since about 5-6 months ago. And Rose got 35 years. So she's patiently bringing me along. And she said to her credit, I really don't want this to sound like a commercial. And so we're not, when we call this, you need to get yourself a team. We're not trying to sell you on one thing or another. We'll get into why you believe that people actually do need a team. But I just want you to know that when I was first approached about doing this by Pat Garcia, I was at a phone store. My wife was looking to replace her cell phone, and we ran into a woman, a lovely woman named Linda Muir, who had taught both of our daughters ballet when they were taking dance. And my wife's like, "That's Linda Muir," and I'm like, "I think it is." And we both are such fans of hers that we started this conversation. She's there with her husband. Turns out he has Parkinson's disease. And he is a person that's gone through Struthers. They talked about Struthers, and I put it in my phone in August. And here we are. This is March. So my journey has taken me all these different ways. But you've always been there in the back of my, on my notes that I need to reach out to Struthers, and that's what I did. Just a cold call, and here we are. So in one of our conversations, one of the most interesting things you said to me was, Parkinson's disease is like an iceberg. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. The iceberg model is kind of an analogy that's often used to describe the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. I certainly didn't invent that model, but it's used widely in the field. And what that means is if you think about an iceberg floating in the water, you see a part that's above the water that's very visible, right? And so you can compare that to the visible symptoms of Parkinson's disease, often referred to as the motor symptoms of Parkinson's or the movement symptoms. Parkinson's is a movement disorder. And those symptoms are things like tremor or slowness in movement or rigidity, meaning stiffness in the muscles, or changes in posture and balance. Those are the movement or motor symptoms of Parkinson's, and they're very visible. But we also know that with an iceberg, floating in that water, under the surface of the water, sometimes is even a larger component. And that's something that is sometimes referred to in Parkinson's as the non-motor symptoms of the disease. And there are many of them. There are things like changes in mood, things like depression or anxiety can be part of Parkinson's disease as a symptom. There can be changes in sleep patterns. There can be changes in the skin. There can be changes in the digestive system, and a whole host of other symptoms, again referred to as non-motor. Now, not everybody develops every symptom of Parkinson's disease, but it's important to recognize that it's not only the movement symptoms, even though it's described as a movement disorder.
And the one thing I hear everybody say consistently is that everybody experiences this differently. Everybody has their own journey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. Everybody with Parkinson's is a little bit different. Certainly there are commonalities and people share symptoms, but each person's journey with Parkinson's is a little bit different, and they experience their symptoms differently over time.
So one of our shared goals at the Parkinson's Project is that if someone is diagnosed, or maybe they have suspicions, you and I both know what they do. They're going to search the internet, and there's a lot of things out there for them to find. If someone stumbled across our conversation and they'd just been recently diagnosed with PD, what was the one thing you'd want to say to them right now concerning their condition that you'd want to say to perhaps ensure or inspire them?
I think to make sure, I think it's very important that they're seeking information and knowledge, but I would really encourage people to get their information from reliable resources. The internet is filled with a lot of information, some of it reliable. Hopefully what I'm trying to tell you is reliable information, but there are some things out there that are less reliable. And so you want to go to sites and listen to podcasts and do things where you feel the information is credible. It's also really important just to recognize that you're not alone. And I think when someone is first diagnosed, it can feel very isolating. Struthers Parkinson Center, for example, has a 1-year program that we have here called the Focus Program, which is really developed for people living in that first year of diagnosis and their friends and family, so that they can learn about Parkinson's disease, get the basics, and also share perspectives and information with other people who are also recently diagnosed. I think that's really, really important for people to do.
Support and help is out there. As I said a moment ago, this disease hits everybody differently. And you referred to that there are commonalities. What would some of those commonalities be that someone could expect that I'm not alone going through this?
Sure. Well, I know, as I said, everybody is different, but I tend to hear two kinds of stories when people talk about their journey to diagnosis. One is that people experience one of those kind of visible movement symptoms that brings them into a doctor or to start to search for information. It might be that tremor. It might be that they're noticing that their arms aren't swinging at their sides as they walk, or a little bit of a shuffle or a drag to their walking pattern. Those people, when they go into a medical office, sometimes are diagnosed quite easily because Parkinson's is diagnosed by the signs and the symptoms and what you're telling a provider. So that's a pretty common path to diagnosis. But there is another path to diagnosis, and it can be more difficult. People who experience maybe not as many of the motor symptoms at first, but experience some of those other symptoms can sometimes have some difficulty getting a diagnosis. Maybe they're experiencing depression, or maybe they're having stiffness or pain relating to the onset of rigidity, or maybe they're experiencing fatigue, which can be overwhelming for some people with Parkinson's. If those are somebody's first symptoms, it may take a little bit of time to get the right diagnosis, and it may take visits to more than one provider. So although there are commonalities, the path to diagnosis can sometimes be different from one person to another.
And we talk about diagnosis, and then you have a program for people in their first year. But as a person progresses with this, is it common that their symptoms or their condition will change, and therefore the need for your team perhaps to change the structure as well?
Yes. Symptoms of Parkinson's will change over time. Unfortunately, we don't have a cure for Parkinson's disease right now. And Parkinson's disease is called a chronic progressive illness, meaning that it will change over time. More symptoms may develop and will develop. And people need a team because as things change over time, they need to talk about that. They need to get to the bottom of the best kind of treatment. It might mean a medication change. It might mean involvement with a rehab therapist to improve their speech and voice, or to learn the right kind of exercise to do. It might be finding the right kind of resources or support. Maybe someone is approaching retirement or thinking about needing to pursue disability relating to their Parkinson's symptoms. So as these things change over time, people need to return and visit the appropriate member of the team who can help them along on that journey.
One of the things that I have learned in this short experience is that the caregiver is such an essential part of this process. If someone's lucky enough to have a partner or family members who are caregivers, or, someone in that support network. If you are that person, if you're that person, you're supporting someone who has PD, what different things should you keep in mind or perhaps be on the lookout for to be a good teammate?
Sure. I think that's a great question. And, I'll preface it by saying not everyone likes the term caregiver. And so I tend to use the term care partner, but I tend to use them interchangeably. So if I say caregiver or care partner, I'm kind of referring to the same support people.
Okay.
And I think that when care partners are trying to be supportive and helpful, I think to recognize some of the symptoms of Parkinson's and to help that person get on it, so to speak, to get some things addressed. Certainly, one of the symptoms that people don't always think about with Parkinson's, and it is a symptom, is the symptom of apathy, where there's kind of a loss of initiative or a lack of motivation, even in people who've been highly motivated and very energetic in the past. And so recognizing that apathy or recognizing symptoms of depression in a loved one is really important to make sure that those symptoms are being addressed, as well as the symptoms of the physical symptoms like tremor, slowness, walking changes, that kind of thing. Really encouraging activity. Lack of activity is not helpful for people with Parkinson's disease. Certainly there needs to be a balance between activity and rest, but it's important that people are active physically, active mentally, active emotionally. All of those things are really, really important. And I think for care partners too, is sometimes to be that partner that accompanies their loved one to medical appointments. Medical appointments can be daunting. There's a lot of information sometimes that's given. Just to be that extra set of listening ears, to write things down, to help to relate the symptoms of when they're occurring and how the medications may be working. And if the medications are not working, when don't they seem to be working? All those things are really, really helpful in the journey of Parkinson's to help the medical team give the best kind of advice and treatments.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's so resonating with me because, even in a general sense, I don't think anyone should ever go to a doctor's appointment by themselves. Yeah. Because you think you hear everything, but you don't. It's just too much to process. So It's good to have that extra set of ears. That's a beautiful piece of advice. So we've been fortunate enough, Rose, to have several people on this podcast who either work in physical therapy or in some form of exercise program associated with PD. You just talked about activity. I'm wondering, do you have a preferred form of exercise, or does it depend on how the disease manifests itself, or is it just bound to basically what the person's going to react to?
Yeah. I always say to people, the worst thing they can do with Parkinson's is nothing. And that is very, very true. It's really important. And research now tells us that exercise has to be an important part of the treatment of Parkinson's disease. The phrase we sometimes use is movement is medicine. And research backs that up. And some of the research that's been done by the Parkinson's Foundation shows that individuals who participate in at least 150 minutes, which means 2.5 hours of exercise each week, do better on their functional scores. They do better on their quality of life scales and in surveys, and they progress more slowly than people who are not exercising regularly. Now, as to the type of exercise, there's a whole bunch of protocols out there, certifications that therapists can take for certain kinds of exercise in Parkinson's. So, people have heard of the BIG program, which kind of looks at large amplitude motions. There's a lot of success around boxing in Parkinson's, rock steady boxing. There's the POWER, Parkinson's Wellness Recovery Program. So here's what I think. All of them have good research behind them. There is not just one exercise program for people with Parkinson's. And when people ask me which one they should do, people should choose the exercise that they're going to follow through with. They have to enjoy it. They have to feel like it's helpful and that it's a fit for them. So there's a host of things out there. And, you know, I am a physical therapist by background, so I probably will put in the plug that it's a really good idea for people with Parkinson's to speak to a physical therapist who specializes in Parkinson's disease, because they can help you find the right fit for you. And they can also help you change that program over time if things change in your symptoms or if new challenges arise.
So I have one question I want to close with, sort of my stock question. Before I get to that, I just want to give you the opportunity. If I didn't ask you anything that you were like, well, I hope he asked me this, or you were expecting me to ask you that, I just don't want you to go away from this interaction and go, gosh, I wish you would have asked me about this. So is there anything you have that, you have that I haven't asked you, or you think is important to get out there?
Yeah, well, I think, I would say that, I think people should expect to use their team and use and see their team many times over the course of their Parkinson's. They don't have to see people every day, but they do need to kind of develop a relationship, a trusting relationship. And you're going to see, and hopefully continue to see, people over time as new challenges arise. Parkinson's care should not be, I always say, not a one and done, right? You can't say, oh yeah, I saw that occupational therapist 5 years ago. Well, maybe things in Parkinson's have probably definitely changed in 5 years, and you may need to see that person again, or that speech therapist. And obviously you need to keep up with your physician to make sure that your symptoms are being managed well and your medications are up to date. So expect to see people for a variety of time and not just once. And then the other thing I would also say is really be comfortable asking questions. If you have developed a good relationship with your team, they should be willing to answer your questions. They may not always have the answer you want or prefer, but they should be able to listen and answer questions. And they should really think, they shouldn't leave you feeling unanswered or unsupported. Now, I know that healthcare is healthcare and there are time constraints on people's times, but you shouldn't ever walk away and feel like, I didn't get any of my questions answered. You really want to find a team that you can work with and feel comfortable in making sure that those questions are answered on a regular basis.
Great stuff. And I think what you're talking about, the last thing about asking questions, I think we go back to the whole thing of having someone else there with you also. Yeah. They should be allowed to ask those questions too, right?
Absolutely. Parkinson's, sometimes we say it's a family disease, right? Certainly it's the person living with Parkinson's, but it definitely has an impact on the family and the support system as well. And they also need support, and they need their questions answered. And they may need assistance with anything from their own physical and mental health challenges, or their own need for support or need for respite care over time. So all those things are important.
All right, last question. If you could get a message out to the world asking people to just do one thing where the Parkinson's disease is concerned, what might that one thing be?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question.
That's why it's the last one, Rose. Here's the big finish.
Maybe I'll come up with two real quick things. I've said one of them already. Educate yourself. Really, knowledge is power. And so look to see what's out there. There is a host of information, of good, credible information. So don't be afraid to ask questions and to educate yourself about Parkinson's. And the other thing I would say is to seek that support. Definitely find a team of medical professionals that you feel comfortable working with in terms of your medical care, but your team extends beyond the professionals. Your team includes your family, it includes your friends, and it includes, maybe it's your faith community or other community organizations. So really build that support system for yourself. Again, no one should go it alone with Parkinson's disease. No man is an island. That's what I always say. You're right. Absolutely.
I didn't invent that one either, and you know that. So here we are. We've reached the end of it. So what we've got here, Rose, is what we're trying to do with this podcast is we're trying to bring on people like you. And I'm just imagining and knowing from our conversations that you have a whole building or a couple of them full of people who deal with this on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
So we want you to know that the door is open and the light is on. We really want your experts, and we want to, so I'd love to have you come back. But if it's somebody in your stead who comes from Struthers that, you know, is doing something particular, we want to be the place where people can come and just find what's new, what's basically useful and informative. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be a little less formal, perhaps much less technical, because obviously I don't swim in those waters. But we want to give those people who do swim in those waters the way to put it in kind of real personal human terms, that this is something that we can help you with. And so I appreciate you answering my email and coming and giving us your time today.
Well, thank you very much. And we will take you up on that offer and hopefully be in touch with maybe some other ideas.
I look forward to it. It's an honor to be with you and the great people at Struthers. Absolutely, for sure. Rose Wichmann is the manager of Struthers Parkinson Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a National Parkinson Foundation Center of Excellence for its comprehensive interdisciplinary approach to management of Parkinson's and related movement disorders. Rose, you are an inspiration. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone at the Parkinson's Project for joining us and for all that you're doing to help people in all aspects of their journey with Parkinson's disease. But we have to say that we look forward to the day when you and the rest of the people at your place are out of business because there is no more Parkinson's disease to talk about. But you'd be okay with that, I'm guessing.
We would be extremely happy about that. That would make all of our day.
Thank you, dear. Appreciate it. All right, we'll talk soon. Don't go away. I'm going to take you out of the feed, but I do want to talk to you for just a minute as I wrap things up, okay?
Okay. Thanks, Tim.
Okay. All right, the Parkinson's Project. We seek to be a place where you can come for a range of information about PD and to find support for yourself or perhaps someone that you love. We encourage you to check us out at the Parkinson's Project. You can find us on Facebook and the Parkinson's Project wherever you find your favorite podcast. Check us out on the podcast site and rate us so we can grow and continue to give support in the ongoing effort to eradicate this affliction. This has been the Parkinson's Project podcast. For executive producer Pat Forcia, I am Tim McNiff. I want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to meeting and working with all of you as we seek to build a supportive, empowering community through all aspects of the Parkinson's Project.
Thank you for engaging with the Parkinson's Project podcast. Be sure to look for more content on the Parkinson's Project Facebook page, and we'll see you right here on the next edition of the Parkinson's Project podcast.